Well, this is exactly what the title suggests it is, a by-the-numbers fairy tale written by literary grandmaster Stephen King. Even at age 75, the man is not slowing down and cranking out yet another 600-page book, just 1 year after his critically acclaimed mystery thriller Billy Summers released in 2021. And this feat gets even more grandiose when you realize that King has so far released more than 64 novels under his own name and 7 more under his pseudonym Richard Bachman, amongst which are absolute classics such as The Shining, It, The Green Mile, Misery, the Dark Tower series, Shawshank Redemption, and I could go on and on and on. Contrary to most of King's other books though, this one has no horror elements and just little mystery, but the same grandiose penmanship that we know and love him for. Having read only one of King's other books so far, namely Misery, which I reviewed in this video right here, I can't say much about how fairy tale fits into his wider body of work. Whether this is a typical King or not, I can just say that as a standalone novel, I was pleased with what I was reading here. For the most part at least, but I will come to that. Therefore, this video will have a spoiler section by the end, but for now I will keep everything as spoiler-free as possible. The book starts off in 2012 in a small town close to Chicago. We follow high school student Charlie Reed managing his teenage life, with all the highs and lows that this might bring. His mom died in a hit-and-run car accident years ago, which in turn made his grieving dad an alcoholic. So Charlie had to learn how to become a caretaker for himself and his dad from very early on in life, which is why when we meet him at age 17, he's the first one rushing to help his neighbor Howard Bowditch after having fallen off a ladder. Bowditch's injuries are bad enough that the medics have to take him back to the hospital, which in turn makes Charlie the man in charge of the old man's dog, a German shepherd called Radar. Mr. Bowditch lived a recluse life by himself, in an old house seemingly fallen out of time. His TV, for example, still had an antenna on top, and there were no signs of a smartphone or the internet wherever you looked. Charlie takes care of Radar to the best of his knowledge and uses his time to explore the old man's house. It is a withered and locked shed in the garden though that especially draws his curiosity, but which Bowditch more than clearly forbade him to investigate any further. And as these kind of stories go, the shed holds a secret that will eventually change Charlie's life forever. As mentioned earlier, fairy tale packs some weight. At 600 pages, King has enough room to build up his characters and give its story beats and plot twist room to breathe and settle down before having to move on. To my taste though, the build-up was a bit too slow, taking almost the first third of the book to get to a substantial turning point in the story. From then on, his creativity runs wild with imagination as he pulls us into a fairy tale world of the likes of the Brothers Grimm, with most of the typical tropes you would expect from it, the good ones and the bad ones. I found the premise of this world, its rules and ideas fascinating. He introduces elements that I've never seen done before, which are truly fairy tale-like. At one point in the story then, he relies on a trope of the genre that I felt was way too overdone by now, and I'd seen way too many times playing out always in the same way. I will talk more about it in the spoiler section later on. No matter where the story takes us though, it's always told in a personal, imaginative and lively language. Written from Charlie's point of view, we are close to the other characters and the absurdities he's confronted with. Being a boy of just 17, Charlie's telling this tale with the right amount of meta-humor and reflection of the genre as a whole to make it more believable. He will tell you when the typical fairy tale trope is just that, a trope, and when these stories play out a certain way because that's how they always play out in these kind of tales. Sometimes you can see the age of Stephen King shining through though, as at times the way Charlie talks has some "how you do fellow kids" vibe. For example, when he calls YouTube just the tube, or when he compliments something or someone by saying they are awesome sauce. I'm not sure if a 17-year-old talks like that. In the end, fairy tale left me well entertained. I would have maybe wished for the tie-up at the end to be something a bit cleverer, something new and unseen, but as Charlie would say, that's how these stories always play out. I was happy to have read, or rather listened to Fairy Tale as an audiobook, as from its narration by Seth Numerick up to its production quality, this was hands down the best audiobook I ever had the joy to listen to. Numerick gives each and every character a different vocal range, excellently differentiating between all the roles he has to play. And the Grandmaster Stephen King also plays a small part in it, so I can highly recommend the audiobook version to you. To wrap things up for now, I'll repeat what I've said in the beginning. Fairy Tale is exactly what the title suggests it is, nothing more and nothing less. It's popcorn entertainment in the best way possible, with some weaker parts and less imaginative story beats in the middle part of its 600 pages. I guess it would be seen as an amazing book by most other authors, but maybe not the best book that King has ever written. It wasn't that easy for me to put a number on it, but I think in the end, 4 stars feels most fitting to me. And if you still want to read it, I would encourage you to save this video for later and stop watching for now, as there will be a small spoiler section going ahead. I've put a link for the book and the audio version in the description below. Check it out. Okay, so now that it's just the two of us left, here's a quick summary of how the story unfolds and what irked me most about it. As alluded to earlier, Charlie eventually enters Mr. Bowditch's shack and finds a well in it that leads him down a narrow staircase to a different world called Empis. A world that has 2 moons, is lined with endless fields of poppy, and has critters the size of big dogs wandering about. Its air is supposed to be vitalizing for whoever is visiting this world, and it has a special apparatus hidden somewhere within its capital city that's capable of rejuvenating humans and animals alike. Charlie knows of this apparatus and plans plans to use it in order to cure and rejuvenate his now sickly and aged dog Raider. Whilst traveling the world in search for this machinery, he realizes that a sickness, or rather a curse, has overcome this land, one which deforms its human inhabitants, making their faces melt and bodies wither. Long story short, in order to break the curse, Charlie eventually has to fight the big old evil of this world, an entity called Gogmagog. As mentioned before, it takes about the first third of the book to even get to this world, but when we eventually do and start exploring it, that was the best part of this book for me. The excitement of what this other land might look like, what its rules might be, what creatures live in it. King takes a few chapters to set the scene, and you read or listen to it in wonder of what might happen on Charlie's road trip next. This excitement climaxes when he explores the capital city in search for the apparatus, finally finds it, and Raider gets sent back in time to come out again as a much younger and revitalized dog. Shortly after, Charlie can't find the exit of the city anymore, and as night breaks in over Raider and him, he gets captured by the so-called night guards. Unfortunately, this is where the weakest part of the book began for me. Charlie gets thrown into a prison cell with a lot of other inmates and somehow has to escape this hellhole. In order to entertain the evil overlords ruling over this place, the inmates are eventually forced to combat each other in a sort of tournament. Of course, Charlie somehow wins, clever as he is, and with the help of one of the prison's servicemen now turned good, he manages to flee. And these two story beats, the prison break and the tournament, even though sounding exciting on paper, have been so overdone in modern media. Whether it's video games or movies or books, it always plays out in the same way, and it is just boring and utterly predictable at this point. So these chapters were a big downer for me and a slog to get through. It was only King's amazing way of writing and storytelling that eventually got me through them. On top of that, the story gets a bit muddy at this point, as King introduces so many new characters and names and new lore to the reader that you sometimes get confused about the who's who and what's going on. Cutting the first 30% of the book short and adding more substance here would have been the better choice, I think, but who am I to tell Stephen King that? We find out that one of Charlie's companions, Leah, used to be a former princess, for example, but that storyline is not nearly as deeply explored as the narrative would have warranted it, especially for the big payoff in the end. And speaking of big payoffs, the ultimate battle against Gogmagog is more or less a screaming contest, rather than an actual fight, and over very quickly. It sounds like I'm hating on the book a lot here, and as you can see, I had some issues with it, but that's only because I think that King can do better. I know he can from what I had read from him so far. He introduces so many interesting concepts in this book, like the two moons I mentioned earlier, or that Charlie's appearance changes in this other world because he's the promised prince that now returns to his homeland. So I still enjoyed my time with Fairy Tale, and I have to underline that the excellent narration of the audiobook played a huge role in that. I would say that if you've already read it, give it another reread in a couple of months' time and listen to it instead this time around. Thank you for listening to me, of all people, and if you're now in the mood for more book reviews like this one, have a look at this playlist right here. Thank you and see you next time. Ciao.